It's quiet. The kind of quiet where even small sounds feel louder. A phone screen lights up in the dark. Another email. Your subscription has been renewed. He doesn't open it right away, just stares at the notification. There's a moment of hesitation, like he's trying to remember what it even is. Then another notification appears, and another. Different services, different amounts, all small. $9.99, $14.99, $6.49. Individually, nothing serious, but something about seeing them together, stacked like that, feels different. He finally taps one, scrolls, then stops. Because for a second, it feels like he's looking at something bigger than just subscriptions, something harder to explain. Everything seems fine. Bills are being paid, salary is steady, but there's a quiet question sitting underneath all of it. If everything is fine, why does it still feel tight? And that question doesn't go away. In fact, this is where it starts. The next day looks normal. Morning coffee, commute, work emails, nothing unusual. His salary hits once a month, let's say around $4,200 after taxes. On paper, that should be enough. But the money doesn't stay long. Rent takes $1,400. Utilities add another $250. Insurance, $180. Then come the quieter ones. Phone plan, streaming services, gym membership he barely uses, cloud storage, food delivery apps, and then the less predictable ones. Dinner with friends, a weekend trip, a new pair of shoes that didn't feel expensive at the time. By the middle of the month, there's still money left, but it's already spoken for. And this is where it gets interesting. Because technically, he's not in debt. No overdue payments, no collectors calling. Credit card balance? It gets paid, most months. From the outside, everything looks stable. But underneath that stability, there's no real space, no margin. Every dollar has a direction. Every expense is already expected. And that creates something subtle. Not pressure, but dependence. Because now the system has to keep working. The salary has to arrive. The expenses have to be predictable. If anything shifts, even slightly, that's when things begin to move. At first, nothing feels wrong. This is how most people live. Income comes in, expenses go out, balance stays manageable. But there's a pattern forming here, and most people don't notice it while it's happening, because debt doesn't always begin with borrowing. Sometimes it begins with alignment. Everything aligning too perfectly. Income equals lifestyle. Lifestyle equals expectations. There's no gap. And without that gap, there's no buffer. So when something unexpected appears, a medical bill, car repair, a sudden trip, it doesn't feel like a big decision. It feels temporary. Just put it on the card. I'll handle it next month. And most of the time they do. But something shifts in that moment, quietly, because now the system has changed. It's no longer earn, spend, reset. Now it becomes earn, spend, recover. And that recovery phase starts to repeat. This is where the first level of debt forms. Not visible, not overwhelming, but just slightly behind. Let's slow this down. Say that one unexpected expense is $800. Not huge, not life-changing. He puts it on a credit card. Next month, he pays $400 of it. Seems responsible. But then something else comes up. Another $300. Now the balance isn't gone. It's rolling. And this is where the math quietly expands. That $800 doesn't stay $800. Interest starts adding. Small percentages, nothing dramatic. But over a year, that same balance might cost closer to $950, or even more depending on timing. Now multiply that pattern. A few small balances, a few months of overlap, and suddenly there's always something being paid down. Not growing rapidly, but never fully disappearing. And this is where things get subtle, because nothing looks out of control. Payments are being made, credit score is fine, but there's a quiet shift happening in the background. Money is no longer moving forward, it's circling. And most people stay here longer than they expect. The system alone doesn't create the problem. The psychology does. Because from the outside, this lifestyle looks normal. Friends are doing the same things, similar apartments, similar spending patterns, weekend plans, vacations. No one is talking about the underlying structure, only the visible parts. And that creates a kind of silent pressure. Not obvious, not direct, but constant. Because no one wants to feel like they're falling behind. So adjustments happen, small ones. Upgrading a phone earlier than needed, choosing convenience over cost, saying yes to plans even when it feels slightly uncomfortable financially. Each decision makes sense in the moment. And that's the key part. Nothing feels reckless. But the system doesn't require recklessness. It only requires consistency, consistent spending, consistent expectations. And over time, that consistency builds something else, dependence. On income, on stability, on everything staying exactly the same. And this is where things quietly deepen. Because now there's less flexibility, even if nothing feels extreme. A year passes, then two. Nothing dramatic has happened. No major financial crisis, no major mistakes, but something feels different. Opportunities start to appear. A chance to switch jobs, maybe take a short break, move somewhere new. But each option comes with a question. Can I afford the disruption? And the answer is unclear. Not because of debt in the traditional sense, but because of everything tied to the current structure. Monthly obligations, recurring costs, ongoing balances. Even if they're small, they create weight. And that weight limits movement. And this is where debt becomes less about numbers and more about freedom. Because the real effect isn't stress, it's restriction. Fewer choices, fewer flexibility, more reliance on consistency. And this is where many people find themselves without realizing how they got there. Not trapped, but fixed in place. Now here's where the perspective changes. Because there are people in similar income ranges living very differently. Not dramatically, not obviously, but structurally. They still earn, they still spend, but there's one difference. They maintain space. Not by avoiding life, not by extreme frugality, but by intentionally leaving gaps between income and spending, between commitments and flexibility. And this changes everything. Because when something unexpected happens, it doesn't shift the system. It fits into it. And over time, that difference compounds. Not in visible ways, but in options. They can pause. They can adjust. They can move without everything needing to be recalculated. And that's the real distinction. Not wealth, not income level, but structure. One system absorbs change, the other reacts to it. And most people don't notice which one they're in until something forces the comparison. Later that night, the phone is still in his hand. The same subscriptions, the same notifications. Nothing has changed, but something feels clearer. It's not about cutting everything or fixing everything overnight. It's just seeing it. Seeing how things connect, how small decisions repeat, how patterns form quietly, and how debt isn't always obvious when it begins. Sometimes it doesn't feel like debt at all, just a slightly tighter version of normal, until it isn't. And maybe that's the part most people miss. Not the numbers, but the direction. Because once you see the direction, you start noticing it everywhere. And that changes how everything feels. Not urgent, not dramatic, just clearer. This is not financial advice, but if this helped clarify something you've been noticing in your own life, consider subscribing, because the next layer of this goes even deeper.